The situation is such that we cannot have a lecture because of coronavirus, which is one of global environmental problems, and that's exactly the topic of our lectures. So we will be talking about global environmental problems. Before we start, let's talk about the environment. What is environment? As you know, environment can be divided into abiotic, so non-living environment, and biotic. So abiotic environment would be something like stones, water, air, and so on. Biotic environment would be living organisms, plants, animals, also bacteria, humans, and so on. We also often talk about natural environment and anthropogenic environment. Anthropogenic means originating from men, man-made, human-made. Although the division is not always very strict. The environment is constantly subdued to changes. It has been changing all the time, and causes for these changes are various. There can be natural causes, like, changes in the activity of the sun, or volcano eruptions, or other changes. Also, other organisms can make changes in the environment. For example, the process of photosynthesis, so introduce the oxygen into atmosphere. So introducing oxygen into atmosphere was due to the photosynthesis, because at first the atmosphere of Earth was with very little oxygen. Another example are skeletons of organisms which make reefs and rocks made of limestone. Also, soil. Soil itself is made by living organisms. Soil is not living, but soil wouldn't be possible without living organisms. Forests influence climate, so also that's how other organisms influence the environment. Trees. Smaller scale influence is building dams by beavers, or building mounds by termites. Obviously, we are interested in human influence, in the way how humans change the environment, because this is something we can change. We can change our impact on environment. And we have two basic questions. Is human influence something new? And is it necessarily something bad? So these two questions we have to answer. Humans in most areas of our globe have to change their environment, otherwise it wouldn't be possible to survive. We need clothes, we need shelters, because the climate in most of the world is not good for us. So humans have to change the environment. So definitely human influence on environment is positive for us, but obviously it can be also negative. And we will be talking about the negative influence on the environment. And human influence on environment is not necessarily a new thing. Some scientists believe that humans contributed to the extinction of so-called megafauna about 10,000 years ago. They mean animals like woolly mammoth or mastodon or saber tiger and so on. Next stage when human influence on the environment was really very big, and it was on a much larger scale, not just extinction of some species, but changing the landscape, was Neolithic revolution, when humans changed from gatherers and hunters into shepherds and farmers. And obviously also geographic discoveries contributed to the destruction of the environment, and they also involved the introduction of new species, which was devastating in many cases for local fauna and flora, and extinction of native species took place in that case, and also propagation of diseases. But something which is associated with the destruction of environment is Industrial Revolution. So it started in the second half of 18th century in England, and in various parts of the world it started in 19th century, and in some countries even in 20th century. Human influence on the environment can be seen in every aspect of the environment. In the environment can also be divided into hydrosphere, so which is water, atmosphere, which is air, lithosphere, which is earth crust, and biosphere, which is the part of atmosphere, lower part of atmosphere, upper part of lithosphere, and the whole hydrosphere, where living organisms can live with these living organisms. So in other words, biosphere are all the living organisms. And humans are also part of biosphere, but human influence is known also as Anthroposphere, and it can be divided into Technosphere, so this would be technology, and Noosphere, so this would be this non-material value which is connected with human mind and all the human activities, not connected with material things, or not necessarily with material things. The list of environmental problems I will present is not necessarily the one which will be accepted by everyone, because it is subjective to much extent. So what are these environmental problems? First one, the best known nowadays and very topical, I would say, is climatic change. Another problem may be more important locally and better visible is pollution. Pollution of air, pollution of water, and pollution of soil. Another problem connected with water, when we are talking about water, is the lack of water, scarcity of water, less water resources. And this can refer not only to countries traditionally associated as countries covered with deserts, but also to countries like Poland, where there are periods of drought which are bad for the vegetation, especially when they occur in spring. That's also dangerous. Another problem is deforestation, so cutting down forests. Again, this problem is on a large scale, but it is not necessarily the same in every country or every region. For example, there is a problem of deforestation of tropical forests, also of boreal forests, but in some areas deforestation does not occur, and even the area of forest is increasing. Another problem is loss of biodiversity. Obviously, it is connected with deforestation as well, but it is connected with many different factors. And soil degradation. Soil degradation is connected with deforestation, especially in tropical forests where soil is very poor. That means that it contains a very low amount of biogenes. In tropical rainforests, all the biogenes, or most biogenes, are contained in the biomass. Once you remove the biomass, you have just very poor soil, infertile ground. So that's the problem of tropical rainforests with deforestation. In temperate climate or in boreal forests, cutting down forests leaves soil which can be fertile. Another big environmental problem is the depletion or diminishing of resources. Resources can be food, and the lack of food causes famine. Resources can be energy, so all the resources which can be converted into energy, and resources can be mineral resources. Next environmental problem is called acid rains, but more precisely it would be acid precipitation, because precipitation is mainly rain, but also snow, or snow and rain together, which is in English called sleet, or hail, which is ice falling out of the sky. And acid precipitation is connected with dissolving in water, in atmospheric water, dissolving of sulfur dioxide and nitric oxides, various nitric oxides, and they are converted into, with reaction of water, they react with water, and they are converted into sulfuric acid and nitric acid. So that's acidification of precipitation, and closely related problem is acidification of oceans. Acidification of oceans can be also connected with the increase of CO2 in the oceans. The global environmental problem that looks as if it has been solved is ozone hole, or the depletion of ozone layer, but colloquially called ozone hole. And this was caused by the use of chlorofluoromethane. But in 2019, the ozone hole was the smallest since the first time it was noticed. So that looks as if the policy of banning freons was successful. So we can say that the ozone hole is a success story. Obviously not ozone hole, but the diminishing of ozone hole. And now the problem, which is far from being solved, and this is urban sprawl. Urban sprawl means uncontrolled growth of cities. Cities are getting bigger and bigger, especially in the developing countries. In the developed countries, situation can be different, but in the developing countries around big cities, informal settlements appear. And this is a very big social problem, not only environmental problem, but also social problem. In Europe, however, there is an opposite situation. People are getting out of cities, and also you can say that it's a kind of urbanization, because there are more and more houses in the villages near the city, and richer people are moving to the suburbs, and you have the problem of empty city centers. Another big environmental problem is the deposition of waste. It has been for a long time, but nowadays the most recent problem is the deposition of plastic waste in the ocean. They come from the land, from the rivers, and oceanic currents can bring them into the ocean. So they make islands, and they are very dangerous for the wildlife, for animals. So this is a very big problem. And last but not least, the problem of pandemic diseases. We are familiar with this problem because it's going on now. And what can I tell you more about that? Okay, that's the end of the first part of my lecture. So, till the next time, bye for now.